These will be tax items, separate public hearing. Here's our option first. January 20th, 2021 MPO Policy Board meeting. A copy of the minutes was provided in the meeting packet. Are there any corrections in the minutes as submitted? I'm wrong already. I'll consider approval. January 2022. Are there any corrections besides the there being no corrections, we'll move to the action items. There's 4 action items today. The first one is item number 4, consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2022-1, adoption of public transportation asset condition targets established by Waco Transit Inc. for the calendar year 2022 for the metropolitan area in accordance with requirements identified as part of the Fixing America Service Transportation, the FAST Act. Dr. Kumar.
I'm ready, Dr. Kumar.
Yes.
Okay. So for the next few minutes, we're going to discuss 3 sets of performance targets that we set for the Waco region each year. And we briefed you on them last month, so we'll hurry through this. So if you look at the bottom box, so we're looking, so if we look at how well we've met our operational targets or not met them over time, it advances our regional transportation vision. You see that on the top, the feedback loop, and then also the development of mobility improvement strategies, that second input box, and to help us reach the goals to achieve that regional vision. And the MPO will be setting its regional vision goals through the strategic planning process that will be underway soon. And then all of these efforts will help the MPO prepare to develop the next long range transportation plan. So just a recap of information presented last month. Transit providers assess the condition of their vehicles and facilities relative to the FTA definition of the state of good repair. The process of setting these targets and then assessing their progress gives transit providers a snapshot of the health of their assets on an annual basis and throughout their life cycle. This helps the decision makers plan future investments at appropriate times when using federal dollars. During the last fiscal year, MPO supported Waco Transit's TAM targets for calendar year 2021. In doing so, the MPO agreed to select a mix of projects that helps Waco Transit achieve their asset condition targets, and that's reflected in the 2045 NTP and the current TIP. And last September, the Waco City Council adopted Waco's transit targets, their targets for calendar year 2022, and that's in the 4th column. So as we discussed last month, Waco Transit would have to replace 17 vehicles to reach its 2022 targets, but their current fleet is still safe and vehicles do not have to be replaced immediately. It's just, we go through this exercise just to make sure local decision makers can act in plenty of time to make necessary improvements. So we held a public comment period, January 24th through February 2nd. And we had a public meeting on January 24th at 1, I mean at 12 noon, and we received no formal comments during the comment period. The technical advisory committee looked at. So the TAC, we always called it technical committee before, but shortened it to TAC, so it's because it's easier for me to say when I don't have water. So the TAC reviewed all of this on February 10th, and we had a public, and we're going to have a public hearing right now. But the technical advisory committee, their recommendation was to adopt. So, did you? All right. So options. That's one I should say. Options for
Conservations and
policy.
actions.
Yeah. Sorry about that slide. It's wrong. Anyway, so today you can either support Waco Transit's target or you consider adoption of different targets. But the MPO staff recommendation and the TAC recommendation is to support these TAM targets.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions on the presentation? There's a lot of acronyms in there.
Yeah.
Waterfall acronyms, TIP, STIP, TAM, or most of them. The one ULB is useful life benchmark. Let's see the explanation of that.
Yeah, I kind of skipped it because we went over it last time. But
Okay.
it's just a measure of
So
how.
then we changed from 2021 to 2022 is the cut. Right. As far as the delta from one year to the next.
Yes, if you look at that chart, that's for the most part, it's correct, yes. He's looking at this type of bus, just for clarification, he's looking at that chart in a little more
Please,
detail.
slide 11 kind of shows the entire.
Right, but they're safe, they're still,
Great.
they're still in great operating condition.
Okay. I know that Manager Stevenson did a good job of presenting this to the council last fall. Are there any other questions? I will open the public hearing at 2:09 for any speakers to address this issue. Close the public hearing at 2:09, since there are none. If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion. A motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes. We move to item 6, or item 5. Consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2022-2, Waco MPO support of public transportation safety targets for calendar year 2022 established by Waco Transit System Inc. in accordance with requirements identified as part of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Fast Act.
So again, this is the second set of targets that we're going to look at today. And last month, we reminded you that the FAST Act requires transit agencies to identify baseline safety metrics and performance targets in a plan referred to as PTAS, or Public Transportation Safety Plan, or Agency Safety Plan. And the intent of Congress is to better assess safety risks within transit networks. The portion of the PTAS that's relevant to the MPO are targets regarding fatalities, serious injuries, number of safety events, and significant mechanical failures for both fixed route and the demand response services. Waco MPO is required to demonstrate how projects identified in the MTP and the TIP are intended to assist accomplishing the PTAS targets of Waco Transit. Again, last September, Waco City Council accepted the safety plan and the safety targets of Waco Transit. That's in the 4th column. And these targets are identified or identical to those adopted for calendar year 2021, because at the time FDA had not released updated to conduct a full assessment. So using the same targets is not problematic this year because Waco Transit's maintaining very low numbers of injuries and fatalities. And we know the mechanical failure rate will improve as we replace vehicles. So we follow the same public adoption, public input process, and the adoption process is the same as the one that we just did. So, public hearing.
Yes. Anything else? Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions to staff? Hearing none, we'll open a public hearing for any speakers at 2:12. Are there any speakers? There are none, we'll close the public hearing at 2:12. If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That motion passes. On to item 6. Consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2022-3, the MPO policy board support of roadway safety targets. Calendar year 2022 established by the Texas Department of Transportation in accordance with requirements identified as part of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation FAST Act. Come on.
Okay, so these are the third set of annual targets that we have to consider. Again, we're here in the last row of our transportation planning process. And as a reminder, when you're looking at roadway safety through the FAST Act requirements, there are 5 different measures that we're looking at: the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities, so the fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, the number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries in one measure. Next. So last month we gave you some detailed information on the analysis for all of these 5 different safety performance measures. And as a reminder, we are recommending that we support TxDOT's statewide annual targets. And these targets are actually reported as a 5-year average. So the highlighted row on the bottom of the table is that 2022 target expressed as the 5-year average. And this does incorporate TxDOT's goal of reducing fatalities to 0 by the year 2050. Next. So what does that mean when we say we'd like to support TxDOT statewide targets? Well, we do this, we have done this every year since these targets started to be implemented in 2018. So this is continuing with our practice. But what it really means is we're agreeing to plan and program projects through our MPO process that will contribute to the accomplishment of these statewide targets. So that will be reflected on a few different levels because as we are familiar with, roadway safety is an issue, not just regionally or locally, but also statewide throughout Texas and across the country. Like this is something that's been really top of mind for people in the transportation industry, as you're familiar, for the last couple of years. So some examples of how we at the MPO can support these statewide targets is we have a regional vision and values and the strategic planning process that we'll talk a little bit about, and we'll talk a bit more about in today's agenda, specifically in preparation for the next MTP cycle. As part of that, as part of prepping for the next MTP cycle, we'll be developing a project selection criteria, and in that criteria, we'll have some specific examples aimed at reducing fatalities and serious injuries for all modes. So again, that's an example of how we move toward programming projects that can contribute toward improving our safety record. This can include things like modal choices, travel time, land use connections, evaluating crash hotspots. Those are some examples of some criteria we'll be looking at as part of the next MTP. And then what we do once we come up with those selection criteria, we use that to help us plan and program projects that get into the MTP and then the TIP, which is our 4-year transportation improvement program. So that's how it kind of funnels through our MPO process to support these statewide roadway safety targets. Next. So that's what we would do at the MPO, but again, this is an effort that needs to be worked on at all levels. Some things that the state's doing is they've talked about, or they have established a statewide safety task force. I mentioned this a little bit at our last meeting that has representatives from the Texas Transportation Commission, TxDOT districts and divisions, as well as 7 MPOs. So we'll be participating in this through our MPO representation, getting advice and being aware of rules or potentially funding opportunities that are coming out of this statewide process. Examples of some national efforts that are happening. I guess it's a couple of weeks ago now. Secretary Buttigieg, the US DOT, announced a national roadway safety strategy. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, seeing if there are new rules or criteria coming out for some federal competitive grants. Those will probably take a few years to be rolled out. But again, these are some opportunities that we can keep an eye on that will again help us plan and program projects to improve our safety record here. And of course, there's that new infrastructure bill. There will probably be opportunities coming out of that directly. So again, the same public input process as those first two transit targets. No formal comments received on this set of targets either. The technical advisory committee did consider this at their last meeting. And next slide, we are recommending that we support the text statewide targets as we have in the past, and happy to answer any questions.
Great presentation. Chelsea, any questions?
So there's no penalty if we fall short of the targets, right?
That's correct. All we have to do, I wouldn't say all we have to do. The way that we talk about our progress is we have a section in our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program right now, it's called Appendix G. And we kind of discuss in detail what we did for these targets, so the 3 today, as well as pavement and bridge and travel time reliability. And we show how they connect to the decisions that were made in the TIP and the MTP. So we are being held accountable by showing that we're doing the work, but you're correct. If we don't meet the target, there's no penalty. We just, think about what we're doing a little bit differently to try and get closer.
Yeah, Councilmember Warder, I always thought when I first got on here that these targets, it should be 0. We should have 0 fatalities, why not 0? I think to reflect on the data, kind of realistically where we want to be, obviously. I think since I've been on there is a 0 target by 2050.
Correct, for fatalities.
So
Statewide.
this is more of a reflection of where's the data taking us, more people on the road.
Yeah, I think it's a value statement from TxDOT, and then what we do is we look at our regional numbers and we compare it to this and see like how much work we need to do, how much investment, how much attention do we have to put toward these targets, depending on how close or far away we are from them.
Exactly.
So TxDOT has a statewide 0 fatality.
Correct. So that was announced by the commission. I think it must have been 2 years ago, and then they started incorporating that into these safety targets last year in 21. So it's 0 by 2050 and half by 2025, I think. Halfway through that period.
And there's a current fatality streak of several years.
Yes, going in the wrong direction. That's correct. It started creeping up in the beginning of the pandemic, and the trend has continued despite things kind of going back to normal. Yeah, so that's why I mentioned some of the national efforts that are also happening around this, because it's on everyone's radar.
Any other questions? At this point, we're open to public hearing for those who want to speak on this issue. 2:20, we'll close the public hearing at 2:20. No further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
A motion for approval, do I hear a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Item 7, the last action item today, consideration and action regarding the appointment of an MPO policy board work group to discuss and provide recommendations concerning strategic planning for the Waco MPO.
This item, we discussed it at the last policy board meeting, and we had a very thorough discussion on it during our TAC meeting. And so instead of in the interest of time, and since all of you have been on this board for long enough, I'm not going to bore you with this very lengthy presentation, but if questions were to come up, we'll be happy to discuss. But the most important thing that I wanted to point out is that some broad parameters for the strategic planning work group, that it has 5 members, and the 5 members will work from March 10th through June 16th and make a presentation to the policy board of the draft recommendation they make. Policy board will consider it, have a discussion, and then most likely, if it finds the draft recommendation adequate enough, it can adopt it during a June meeting. If not, we will adopt it in July meeting. This group will meet twice every 2 weeks with the MPO staff, in which MPO staff will do all the preliminary work and make the presentation to the policy board during every month, including the TAC meeting. And the goal effectively is to develop a 5-year strategic plan with this idea in mind that the 2050 MTP is going to be up for consideration to the policy board in 2025. And that's the 3-year plan that we need to make sure we are all on the same page with. And then along with that, 2 more years of evaluation in which we self-evaluate how our performances are in terms of MTP. So that's the 5-year strategic plan. for which this work group will put together a draft recommendation. The documents, as we produce, we will share them as we prepare the draft with both the TAC and the policy board for any discussion or input as we do.
Okay. Hey, I gotta go because I got my policy meeting started.
These are some of the preliminary work that we have already started doing at the MPO so that the strategic planning work group's progress is made as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. So at this point, one of the things that what we have here for our consideration is that the 5 members, we have had nominations for all 5 of them, 2 from the policy board, 2 from the TAC, and 1 at-large member. And at this point in time, I think we can have a discussion on the role of the strategic planning work group, and then we'll
Okay,
and take any nomination.
okay. On the basis of that presentation, are there any questions about this board, about this working group? Because I understand it's a working group, kind of a subcommittee. This policy board still has the final say on everything. This is kind of maybe tracking some special projects or trying to really engage better, maybe with what some of the grassroots parts of the overall MPO planning is. But even the subcommittees working group will go up to the TAC, and this board will have final say on any changes you make in the movement. And further, I think if anything is weird, that subcommittee heads up to the policy board. But at this point, do we take nominations, or do we have a slide that shows the existing nominations? A lot were provided online. Or is there any questions first of all? I think
We need to create the group first.
okay.
can take nominations.
Okay, so that.
So do we need a motion to create the group? And
Yes.
then a separate motion to take out the composition of the group?
Yes.
Okay, that's the order. So I'll entertain a motion to establish.
So
Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Motion passes. We have a working group. So at this point,
Yeah, so we had asked for nominations to be sent both to Councilman Holmes as the policy board chair, as well as myself. And these are the 5 nominations that have been made by the members of the policy board, which are in front of you. And if there were any nominations from the floor, then I think we can take them up.
okay. I recognize the nominations. Do you want to state the argument?
Yes, so we have Councilman Jim Holmes, City Manager Bo Thomas, Director of Public Works for the City of Waco, Amy Larry Highland, Zane Dunn, County Engineer, McLennan County, and she was the former MPO policy board member.
So 2 from policy, 2 from TAC, 1 from at-large sort of member. These nominations were received by you throughout since the last meeting.
Yes.
Are there any additional nominations? Any further nominations?
I have a question regarding that board. Can you explain again what that specific board is going to do?
Yes, absolutely. So we have 2 major, but they're not challenges, they're sort of shift in the context of our NPO work. One is that we are anticipating that given 200,000 population count, that it is likely that we may become a TNA. Once we become a TNA, it changes a lot of requirements that we have to be prepared for. Simultaneously, it also allows us better say in some of the category 9 funds, for instance. So that's one major concern. The other major shift that has occurred over the last 5 years is that the way our region has been growing, our mobility and access challenges have become different. And so as they change, we need to also start reflecting these into our project selection criteria, including the also proposals. So what the strategic planning group is supposed to do is sort of help us walk through what are all the necessary steps that we need to take not only in our preparation for TMA, but also how do we respond to the new context-sensitive mobility and access challenges that we're experiencing throughout the region over the next 5 years. And so in the last presentation, one of the items that we had emphasized is that since we were relatively small, a lot of our approach to planning was largely, started off with this idea that we have a large group of projects, and then we whittled them down into about manageable numbers that we could potentially fund, and that's what went into our MTP and the process. But as we're mandated, and one of the things that I think every policy board member has a copy of today, that we wanted to make sure that see that our planning process that we're mandated with it is a continuous process in which the performance also needs to move back into our thought process about MTP. So the strategic planning work group is supposed to lay out the entire map so that we know what do we need to do for the 3 year when the MTP is presented to the board, and then for additional 3 years so that we have an idea about how do we start preparing for the next MTP. So that's the major thrust of the strategic planning work group. So it basically provides us a map and layout and tells the MPO here are all the very specific steps that we need you to take.
And that works separately from that.
Yes, so what they will do is, so they will meet every 2 weeks with the MPO staff, in which we are doing preliminary work. And for each TAP meeting and each policy board meeting will present for feedback. And so, yes, they're completely separate. This work group is sort of what you would call an ad hoc committee that you created only for a defined period in which it does its work and then dissolves. So it is not a member of, it is not a standing committee, it is not a member of TAG or the policy board. Its role is to help lay out the map for what the MPO needs to do to address these two major changes in the context that must respond.
Any other questions? Again, I'll ask for further nominations for work group members. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll put these nominations to a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Welcome to the work group. So you're just going to reach out to these 5 for the first one.
Yes.
Next item, number 8, the discussion and updates from the Texas Department of Transportation regarding significant highway construction within the Waco area. My favorite part of this deal. Jeff Jackson.
Good thing, I'm filling in for Clayton today. He had to be out, wasn't able to make it. Get started. So first project we have here, Waco 88 project, is the ones of this one, Clifton Street on US 84 Waco Drive, all the way at the center point by Home Depot. It's a pretty substantial ADA improvement job. Upgrading sidewalks, signals, make that a lot more pedestrian friendly corridor. About $10 million job. We started a couple months ago, looking at finishing completion end of 2022. Contractors making good progress. They're working on their signal boards, their drill shaft foundations for the new signal poles, and following up behind that with sidewalks. They started on the east end. They're kind of working toward, I think they're about Valley Mills with their boards and signal shafts now, and then following up behind that with the sidewalk. I'm sure many of y'all noticed some signals going out on Waco Drive. It's a tight corridor. We do have a lot of utility issues there, so we're working through those, but we're working pretty close to the city of Waco to get those addressed as we find. Next project here, FM 185. This is between FM 939 or 938 and 317 in Crawford. The widening project, getting a little bit more room shoulders. We're adding garfins to protect some areas and widening culverts to get more pavement width there. Contractors making good progress there. No major updates. They started some of their widening. Right now they're finishing a lot of the culvert work. Next one here, State Highway 31 overpass at FM 939. That's the one's actually managed out of a different office, but talking with them, it looks like they've got a lot of their structural work done on that eastbound bridge, their 939. I think the update here is a little behind. They've actually, Weber's the contractor on this one, so they typically move fast and we can keep up with on these presentations. But I think they're getting close to point the bridge deck on this one next week, but eastbound bridge. Probably about the same time next week, they're looking at doing some grading and some paving done. for the approach to that eastbound bridge. The westbound will follow pretty closely behind it, so they're making good progress there. Next project, State Highway 6, Mall to Mall, finally starting to see some activity on that project. Contractor started work first part of January there. A lot of their focus has been on the back of the U-turn bridges. They've got a lot of the substructure done there. They've got a lot of columns poured as well, so that area is starting to take shape. I think they're looking at setting beams on that one end of February, so here in a couple of weeks. So we're getting mid to late March or early April. Hope we have some of those open. We've also closed 2 U-turns so far. As part of this project, we closed the westbound at Beverly, which it's had a pretty good impact. And then on the other side, the Imperial eastbound U-turn. So we've got signage to get people around those. We've been in close coordination with a lot of the businesses there. Another part of the closure we have with those U-turn closures is industrial. So we've got our public information guys, John, Jake, reaching out to them, those businesses. So if you know someone in there that's been impacted and hasn't been talked to, let me know. We can get in touch with them, kind of keep them updated on the schedule there. Again, this project's moving pretty good, and they've got looking at end of 2023 to get that one finished. There's some pictures from these are the U-turn bridges and the columns they've got done. You can kind of see those starting to take shape. Here's some drill shaft extensions for the abutments on for the new frontage road bridge going over the railroad there, eastbound in Imperial. And our pet project here, our big one, I-35 4B, starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on this one. To date, I believe you paid out, say, 324 million out of 347 million. This thing was lead. Maybe a little deceiving. There's a little bit more cost that have accumulated. See it's next photos. Let me step over here so I can see. Here we're seeing the some of the paving work there at 17th Street. Getting some of the tie-in work. We're making good progress there. Hopefully by end of the spring we'll have that tie-in completed to the existing pavement on the south end of the job. Here you can see at 11th and 12th Street for the last several years, we've had that one kind of blocked off with a huge pile of dirt. You can see now they've got that cleared out. They've got the intersection starting to take shape. They've got the bond breaker, the asphalt that supports the concrete pavement down. So they're making good progress there, and that hopefully we'll get that open in March. New configuration, 11th, 12th Street is on the Angelo, and you kind of see how that lines up there. Here you can see we've got a lot of our paving done, a lot of our bridges done. There's some gaps that they're filling in with concrete paving on the northbound main lanes. Looking to begin been paving there early March, so they're this contractor looking to bring in another paving crew to get some of that work expedited there. Here we're looking at 4th and 5th Street intersection. Again, this one's starting, the new alignment of this intersection is starting to take shape pretty well. Again, the intersection work continuing into March. They're going to kind of hit all these together as they come in. When we get ready to do some concrete paving on them. Here's some work going on University Parks. You see they just recently poured the deck there. They've got some pavement work approaching that from the south, and then right there, that little gap between the river and University Parks, they've got to get some mainline paving there along with that ramp. Along with that, they've got a little bit of work there at the University Parks intersection. Hopefully to get some of that U-turn there opened up here quickly. You can see the beams of the northbound main lanes there. They've got a lot of the deck panels set again. By the time we get pictures of, they've already progressed a lot more. They're making good progress there. Hopefully getting ready for that deck pour soon. You can see kind of to the north, there's a bond breaker section set. They're looking at getting that concrete pavement knocked out as they come in with their second crew. Here's looking at the MLK bridge. They're by the stadium. Again, good progress there. Beach set, panels going in. They'll be getting ready to get that deck poured here pretty shortly. This is the UPR bridge deck just north of MLK. I think that this is kind of the one that was lagging behind the most, kind of working with the railroad, but they're making good progress there. You can see beams are set, just some approach work, some approach paving, and then getting the deck poured. Here's 77 intersection next to our home office. They've got most of the concrete paving done for the 77, business 77 on the east side. You can see it starting to take shape now on the west side. So hopefully looking in to move in as their contract or their concrete paving crews come in to get some of that knocked out as well. Here's looking at 84. This is looking south by HEB there. Again, making good progress with that. I believe they're looking at getting that deck poured here shortly. They haven't already. I know they've got a lot of them scheduled here coming up pretty soon. We do have some traffic shifts coming up late February, early March. That shouldn't be anything that anyone takes notice of. It's literally shifting traffic over so they can fill in some of these paving gaps that they've left out. As far as main lane traffic, there shouldn't be a whole lot of notice there. So those will be coming up soon. Here's looking at intersection at Barron's, I believe. And again, they've got some intersection work they've got to clean up there, and then some paving on the northbound main lane for ramp tie-ins. Again, they're making incredible progress on this. Here looking at the paving, we've got that little black area with bond breaker. They've got to get, that's part of what that traffic shift is allowing us to get in there and pave, moving traffic over. They can get in there and get that tied in completely and tied into the new frontage road paving. And I kind of went through that quick. So, if there's any questions? Anything? Yes, sir.
12th Street, 4th, 5th, and U Parks, are you still on track for kind of a May 2 lanes both ways opening up, or what's that schedule?
It may be a little later than that. I think as they come through and get those intersections paved, I think they're going to start at 11th and 12th Street, kind of work their way as they hit them. So as they concrete pave it, we'll be opening them up as soon as they're paved. So whatever, as that new paving crews, it comes in now, hopefully expedite that. Yeah, May is probably safe. Maybe it may go a little later than that, depending on how the weather and how their crews go.
But it'll be from 11th, 12th coming out to the river. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? So we moved the substantial completion date up into 2022 now, right?
Yes, sir. They were. I think I skipped over that part. Yeah, the substantial completion date.
Seems like we got 2022.
Like 2022. Hopefully, we're maybe even a little earlier than that. They're making good progress.
That's fantastic. I just remember all the angst when we started this project 4 years ago about downtown, but it's moved so quickly. And you've been very informative and very transparent and communicative as we go along on this project. And well, it's not the track of this thing. And then the other thing, there's always workers out there. Because I know that a lot of times the city does projects and sometimes the crews move around. Maintain great visibility.
Now, we noticed that it's amazing what that does of the perception of the project. I think people out there doing things. It's pretty cool.
All right, any other questions, Jeff?
I've got one. This is a project that's down the road. On Route 340 between Highway 6 South and Bellmead that stretch through there.
Okay.
What's the timeline on that?
I believe, I know we want to get through this project here, so we don't have a lot. Victor may be able to help me out on that one as far as when we're looking at letting that. I know from the conversations I've had and the schematics I've seen, I believe we're locking down the schematic on that one, and from there, then we go to letting it from the 340 the Highway 6 there.
Yeah, so we're working on getting PSME finalized, and right now we are tentatively looking at putting into FY27 fiscal year. Okay. So that's construction years. That's tentative for right now.
Thank you.
Sir,
Any other questions? Okay,
thank you all.
thanks again, Jeff. Next item is the director's report.
So the first major report I have Chelsea give you an update on the budgeting of this whole budget.
Yes, so I'm on the statewide BPAC, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It's a committee that I guess reports to the Transportation Commission. And this year I was elected vice chair of this committee. So I'll be doing periodic reports. We have quarterly meetings, and so the month after the quarterly meeting, I'll just tell you what we talked about and be open to any questions or if you want to have follow-up conversation. So what was interesting is previously this committee only focused or mostly focused on bicycle issues. And this past year, it was expanded to include pedestrian and micromobility. We have a little bit of experience in micromobility in this region. Reasonable. So one of the major tasks for this committee, excuse me, for this year is updating the strategic plan because of the expanded scope. So that's going to be a priority focus. We've already done some tasks to like kind of sort through some of the recommendations that have been coming up. So we'll keep an eye on that. And related to our conversation earlier today with our state roadway safety targets is as part of that statewide roadway safety task force, there's going to be a subcommittee specifically focused on roadway safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. And I think there's an opportunity for this BPAC committee to provide direct feedback into the work that that subcommittee is doing. So that's a really good opportunity for us to make sure that some of the concerns that we're seeing here in our area get reflected back, up into the process. So that's my report for this quarter.
Okay, congratulations on being the vice chair.
Is it congratulations? It's really interesting and fulfilling. TechSouth's doing a lot of great work, and I wasn't really aware of all what was going on behind the scenes until I started participating in this. So it's been good. Yep, that's it.
So our next meeting is on March 17th at the same location we have here. I wanted to give you a little bit more update on the technical committee bylaws since at the last planning board meeting. I suggested to present the draft bylaws which were sent to you at the beginning of February, and we still have time for you to provide input into the bylaws. And it is really important that we establish this technical committee as a more formal committee, primarily because we have at least 4 major changes that need to occur. And so in the bylaw, you'll notice that we have 4 different standing work groups that will be reporting and directly participating with the TAC. So we have bicycle and pedestrian work group, we have CABS, the Connected Automated Vehicle, Transportation, Land Use and Mobility work group, and also Citizen Participation work group. And so of these work groups, we know that 2 of them are new, the Citizen Participation work group and the Transportation and Mobility and Land Use work group, because it is really important that as we start thinking about the next MTP cycle, we start thinking about how do we incorporate the land use considerations into the planning process itself. And therefore, we want the TAC to be able to provide much more refined recommendations to the policy board as we expand the scope of the planning material that we cover. So the very first step in that direction is to establish the bylaws, which you have a draft, and we are expecting that that you will give all the feedback that you have on the draft so that we can adopt it at the next policy board meeting. Immediately following that, we'll also have formal elections for the TAC, in which we'll elect the chair and the vice chair. And then the chair of the TAC will have a standing agenda item during the policy board meeting at each of these meetings. And that way, TAC's work is directly then linked into the policy board, and all the work groups that we have that do a lot of behind the scene work, that it also flows smoothly in a systematic manner to the policy board. And so that's sort of larger vision with which we're operating with. And so we have already talked about this quite a bit, and I already talked about the timeline. And so that's the director's report. I did want to update you that 2023-2026 TIP is what we're working behind the scenes. And we will have a draft presentation to the policy board during the April meeting with the May adoption date. And we are also having very in-depth discussion on travel demand modeling for the area, not only locally, but there is a bit of a concern due to COVID trip count data that TechStars have collected. So we're trying to figure out how do we work with the code, data that were collected during COVID period and still be able to produce some reasonably good and robust TPM model So if there is any other item that you need to be included into the agenda, please be sure to email me and copy Councilman Holzman.
Thank you, Coach. So no other agenda items, as Dr. requested, none. This time, we'll say the next MPO policy board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 17th, 2022, at 2:00 p.m. We'll allow another hearing to provide the opportunity for the public to address the MPO policy board on any item of MPO business not identified on this agenda. Receive the cards. So we're going to open the hearing. Now, since we didn't receive the cards. Yeah, so we start that. All right. There being no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting at 2:48.